So I've got a 4500 sized procedural map loaded up here, and we want to add a large sized monument to the map. Now, adding things to the map is much easier than removing them because of the way the procedural system works. It basically stacks different functionality onto the map as it goes, and so it's kind of designed to be added to, whereas once these things have been put in place, stripping them back requires a pretty good understanding of how Rust procedural system works. And so we're going to be going over both today, but we're going to start with adding a monument because adding a monument is much easier than removing a monument. So that's what we'll be doing. All right. So first thing, we want to scout out a good area for our monument to go. And I found this area where I want to put power plant. As you can see, it's pretty rocky, like rough terrain. All this stuff is going to have to be cleared out in order to make way for the monument, but it should be relatively simple. So first what we want to do is we want to get a gauge for how much space the monument's going to take up and sort of like the footprint of where it's going to go and get everything nicely lined up for us. To find the monument in the game's files, we're going to go to the prefab section in the upper right corner. You'll see it's a drop down, and the first option is the prefab list, and so we're going to open the prefab list. That's going to create this little window here that we can drag around. To find our monuments, those are going to be under the auto spawn folder. Auto spawn is the folder that Rust uses to create all of the procedural objects for the map. We're going to find that under assets, right here under bundled, and then prefabs, auto spawn. So that's going to have all of our auto spawn stuff right here. You'll see there's a folder called monument. That's where our monuments are obviously going to be. And now we've got this big list. These are all of our monuments. They're under different folders, so like the jungle ruins are obviously under the jungle ruins folder. Ice lakes, lighthouse gets its own folder for some reason. What we're looking for is power plant. That's a large monument, so that's going to be under the large monuments folder. And we can see power plant is right here. Now, there are two ways to add a prefab to the map from the prefab list. And the first is to drag and drop, and the second is to just double click. For really large monuments, there's a lot of stuff that your computer's going to have to load. And especially if you're kind of like compute limited, like you don't have a great graphics card or a great CPU, that can be a rough process. So here, I'll show you with a smaller prefab, this bush. We can just take it, click and hold, and then we can just drag it into the scene and drop it wherever we want. Whoop, I lost some frames there. So, very easy. The other way to do it is I can just double click on it, and it'll appear right in the center of my screen. It also appears with this nice little window, the transform tool window. I'm going to move this over to the left here. This is going to show us our like position, rotation, scale stuff. We'll mess with it later. Don't worry about it for now. But yeah, for large monuments, the move, if your computer struggles a bit, is to do the double click method. Don't try to drag and drop. Like if I drag and drop here, you'll see I lose a bunch of frames. I've got a really powerful computer though, so I can manage this really well. But the easier way to go about doing it is just to double click, and then you're probably going to have to wait a second for everything to load. Once it's loaded though, you can drag it around. Usually it's pretty easy from that point forward. So now we've got the power plant in the scene. Now we've got to put it in the place we want it. So what I'm looking for when it comes to like good placement is I want to try to line the edges up with the rest of the terrain. The middle of the terrain, that's all going to be morphed to shape the like power plant terrain shape. So we actually don't really need to worry about the middle so much. We want the edges to line up really nicely so that the monument blends into the terrain seamlessly, and we don't have like weird things like roads going off of cliffs into nowhere, or weird like giant drop-offs or steep hills or whatever in places that don't make any sense. So I'm actually going to move this down. We're going to actually drop it way below the terrain here. And then that way you can see the edges of the monument are lining up with the terrain much better. See that? So we still want it above the river because, you know, we wouldn't want our river runoff to spill into the power plant here. That wouldn't make any sense. Gameplay wise, it wouldn't make a difference. I like to have the physical layout of the map kind of make sense, and having super weird things like rivers that are on top of hills or something like that, it just always feels like really weird to me. Like, you know, like wouldn't the water want to come down here? Because it's like it's lower over here, so why is it up here? But anyway, so we just want to make sure our edges line up nicely. Now, as you can see, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a bunch of stuff in the way here that we're gonna have to get rid of in order to make this work. Because right now it's literally unplayable, So we're gonna have to move all these like cliffs and stuff. But first, I want to make sure our placement is like nice and perfect. So one thing that you have to worry about, well, I guess two things really. For one is rotation. It can be very easy to just like rotate things and be like, oh, this looks good. But over here in our transform tool, you can see that the rotation is now a really weird number. And for the most part, this is fine. Like you're not going to have any like weird repercussions for having this loaded into the map this way. Like the game will handle it fine. But for future edits, if you're going to be editing this map and adding things, it's just, you're gonna have so much of an easier time by just choosing nice round numbers for stuff like this, where, you know, if you want to be adding on to it, or you want to add a road somewhere or extend the rail system or something like that, it just makes your life so much easier to have everything kind of nicely aligned on the grid, and that just makes the placement a lot easier. Just trust me. For future edits, you're generally just going to want to make sure that when you do weird rotations and stuff like that, you just pick a nice like round number, like 270, you know? Or like if I'm like, but like, you know, 310-ish looks like so much better. If we're going to do that, then make sure it's nice and round, 310 even, no weird decimals or whatever. You'll thank me later. I like 0 because it's perfectly aligned to the grid. Like all the roads are perfectly north, south, east, west. And it looks good this way in this particular spot. You know, you might want to rotate yours like 45 degrees or 30 degrees or whatever, but just make sure you pick a nice round number. Now for the position, there's something about that I'm going to get into in just a sec. But we actually don't need to worry about the position, the exact position, too much. Normally I would like to have it like nice round numbers for the position, but it's a large monument that has a train station, and the train station comes with a little bit of a complication, which is that it needs to connect to the subway system, and the subway system is aligned on a grid. This button here, snap to tunnel grid, what this is going to do is this is going to move the whole monument slightly so that this train station is positioned on the grid for the subway system. Once we've got this monument set in place, you want to make sure you're diligent about never rotating it slightly or moving it slightly, because we want to make sure we're always aligned with that tunnel grid when we start changing the map to fit the monument into the map. Now, the important thing to know is that it's not going to round to the nearest number. It's going to round to the higher number. So if I want my monument at a height of around like 3 meters. And so I put the monument at 3.1 meters. When I click this snap to tunnel grid, it's going to snap the monument up to 4.5 meters because the tunnel grid system is aligned on a 1.5 meter grid, which is, it is what it is. But that's what it's going to aim for. If you're at 3.1 meters, it's going to snap it up to 4.5. If you're at 2.9 meters, it's going to snap it up to 3 meters. It's always going to choose the higher number. You'll see when I press the button here, the monument's just going to shift slightly so that it's matched with the tunnel grid. We want to make sure now that it has been set to the tunnel grid. This thing's not going to move. Just remember that, okay? Because once we apply all the terrain and the topology and stuff, it's going to be really, really, really annoying to move it after the fact. So we want to make sure we've got it in the spot that we want it. And this looks pretty good to me. So yeah, I think this is in the right spot, and it's not going to move from here. So now that it's set, let's actually integrate the monument into the map, because as you can see, it's literally unplayable right now. It's got all this stuff all over, and you can't get to the loot access or anything like that, and there's probably a bunch of weird broken things happening because it's under the terrain. So we need to get the terrain in the right shape, and we need to get all the rocks out of the way. Now the rocks are actually individual prefabs. You can click on them and maneuver them and stuff. So they're actually like part of the map as individual prefabs, just like the monument is. The terrain, on the other hand, this moves independently of the rocks. So as you can see here, I'm pushing the terrain down, and the rocks are staying in the same spot. This leads to a lot of opportunities for things to break, so you need to be really careful about this part. So first what we're going to do is we're going to clear all the rocks out. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to highlight the monument so I can see it. You can see these little lines under the terrain to show where the monument kind of is, where its footprint is. And move this transform tool out of the way. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to look straight down at it. I'm going to get as close to it as I can, because in order for this to work, the prefabs actually have to be visually loaded onto the screen. If I go too far away, I won't be able to select all of them. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to select all of the rocks at once and just delete them in one go. I'm just going to go down from the lower right corner here, and I'm going to make this big selection box. I'm going to select everything in this general vicinity. I'm going to add a nice big border of area around the monument, a nice big padding area, because all this terrain is going to get changed. So all these rocks need to go. Now we've selected everything in that field of view, except, well, not except actually. The monument itself is also still selected. You can see it's got this orange line around it. So we want to deselect the monument now. The way you do that is we've got everything selected. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, Alt, Alt. And while I'm holding that key down, I'm going to click on the monument, and that's going to deselect the monument while keeping everything else selected. So now everything that's selected, theoretically, should just be rocks. Sometimes you have to be careful. Like if there was a subway tunnel underneath here, sometimes you can accidentally select the subway tunnel, and you delete that, and you're going to have a bad day. So be careful when you're doing the window selection method, that you've only got the things selected that you want to delete. And this looks good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the delete key. We've got a nice clear area. We've missed a few things. We've got a nice clear area for our monument to go. Now, from here, things are real easy, okay? We'll look here at the transform tool. These 4 buttons are the ones that you need to worry about. This bottom one, I'll explain it later, but basically it just resets the loot crate positions. What these do is essentially like stamp all of the parameters of the monument into the terrain and integrates it into the terrain. We're going to start with the height mask. What this is going to do is it's going to snap all the height points of the height map so that the terrain fits the power plant terrain. It's essentially going to stamp a power plant shaped ground shape into the terrain. So we click that and boom. Now the terrain is the correct shape for power plant. And as you can see, since we've changed the terrain and since there's this big border region where the terrain is affected all the way out here, now we have all these floating rocks. So this is, again, the part that we're going to have to be really diligent about, because this is literally unplayable, and your players will find every single one of these if you forget one, because you will forget one. So you want to make sure that you go around and double, triple check that you've got all the floating rocks deleted. If you want to get like super into it, okay, that's weird. If you want to get super into it, you can try to salvage some of the rock positions, because obviously this is detail that we are removing from the map now. And you know, you can place it here and you can mess with it and try to get it to line up with the terrain just right, and you know, that looks good. That's going to take a ton of your time. There's easier ways to do this after the fact. I'm not going to go over them in this video, but it's easier, and honestly nobody really seems to give a shit anyway, to just delete all the floating stuff. And you can also, like, you know, you can use their selection tool method here to make your life a bit easier. And always make sure you come in and check stuff like this, because you never know, you know? It could be floating and literally unplayable. So just make sure you get all the stuff. Yeah, this is stuff you gotta be careful about, because that is literally unplayable. So stay vigilant. Also, be careful about this, because you know, you're clicking all over the map and you're hitting the delete key. Sometimes you delete things that you don't want to delete, so be careful when you do that. So we've got our height set. Aha! Look, see? I forgot one. This is why you got to go around a couple times and just double check everything. Oh my god. Literally unplayable. Okay, this all looks good. Now this is like, you're pretty much good to go here, except you're not. There's still a lot that needs to be done. So you may have noticed that the textures haven't been applied yet. So we've got gravel and stuff that is supposed to be there that isn't there. So we're going to do that next. This one's super simple. Doesn't need much explanation. The splat is basically the ground texture. So things like grass, gravel, stone, snow, stuff like that. That is going to be your splat mask. And so what this is going to do, the noticeable part, is going to be, it's going to put gravel underneath all of the roads and stuff. And it's going to do that in the shape of, you know, power plant. So we'll just click on that and boom, look at that. You can click it more times, like, you know, you can like spam it and it will add more like definition to the, what's it called, to the splat. But then you also get this weird effect where it kind of looks like pixelated and squarish. And so I found that it's best you just click it once and all the blending will work and just be done with it. So that's that. Next up is topology. Topology is going to be invisible, but it is the most important part here, okay? This is what makes removing monuments so much more difficult than adding them, because you have to go through all the topology layers and make sure that they're all removed when you remove a monument. So like, I'm going to go to my terrain painter in the upper right corner here so that we can look at those topology layers. I'm going to choose which layer I'm looking at. It says layer splat. I want to look at the topology layer. It's a drop down. I just click on it. So right now what we're looking at is we're just looking at the field topology. There's lots of different topologies. This is the field topology. You'll see also here's the cliff topology. Now there were a bunch of cliffs here. We got rid of them. So now this cliff topology actually needs to go. This is going to change the way that things procedurally spawn in this area. The cliff topology will prevent certain things from spawning, so we need to get rid of it if it's not necessary, which it's not. We got rid of the cliffs. They're gone now, so now we need to get rid of the topology that was there. Now luckily, really the only thing you need to worry about when it comes to cliffs is the cliff and cliff side topology. So you don't have to do that much cleanup, and you're basically just removing a bunch of stuff, so it's super easy. But monuments, it gets a lot more difficult because we've got all these different layers here. I think there's 32 different layers that you have to go through and check each and every one of them to make sure that the monument didn't totally mess everything up. So for our cliffs here, we're just going to remove it. There's a drop down here. It says paint tool. I'm on the eraser tool because I'm just erasing stuff. So we're just going around, we're just going to erase all that cliff topology because we don't need it. There's no cliffs there anymore. That's all we need to do. We just clear that out. Now somewhere in here is cliff side. It should be closer to the top. Oh, it's at the bottom. Okay. Yeah, so cliff side, this spawns next to cliffs. What cliff side's job is to spawn nodes. That's what cliffside does. It spawns nodes. So obviously, we don't want power plant to be node city. So we need to get rid of all this cliffside. Now we might want to leave some like right here, have some nodes spawn over here. But in power plant proper, we need to get rid of all these node spawns. We don't want a ton of nodes just like spawning all over here. That's going to be a mess. So we want to get rid of our node spawns. Or our cliff side. Because we remove the cliffs, we don't want node spawning there. Everything else though is normal. Here's field topology. What field topology does is it spawns a bunch of different stuff. But field topology is designed, as you can see, to be on top of monuments. Monuments can be placed on top of field topology. It's not going to make a difference, so you don't need to worry about field topology. Other things you might need to worry about are the topologies that are going to mess with the way things spawn, or specifically like blocking other topologies. So like rail, for example. Now we didn't have to move any rail or any road to put this here, but if you had to remove rail or road from this area and then put the monument here, you're going to need to remove that rail topology because the rail topology will actually prevent anything from showing up there. And so will the road, and it'll also act as a build block. So if you're wondering why do I have a weird build block in like this area, and there used to be a road there or a rail there, that's what's doing it. It acts as a build block, so make sure you get rid of that. Same thing with like ocean. If you raise this up from being undersea or being like an island or something like that, you're going to have to get rid of the ocean side, offshore, and all that. Same thing with rivers. If you get rid of a river, you're going to have to get rid of the river topology and the riverside topology. And the same thing with lakes and oases. Oases? You have to get rid of the lake and the lakeside. Otherwise, everything else is pretty normal, except for maybe beach. Like if you've got weird beach topology. Alt is just a different type of forest topology. And forest side are also fine. You don't need to worry about those. You really just need to worry about the path topologies, so river, rail, road, and if you had a monument here, building topology. Building topology basically acts the same as road topology. It just blocks everything, except it doesn't act as a build block. You can build on building topology. Building topology isn't for like building, it's for buildings. It's basically there to block things from spawning inside of a building. So like if I put a monument down and it's got a warehouse there, I don't want a tree to spawn in the warehouse. So building topology prevents things from spawning there. Summit doesn't really matter, and it never really gets used, except for here for some reason. I don't know why the swamps use it. It also shows up on the top of mountains. I think it just prevents like trees from spawning, basically. I don't. It's probably one of the most useless topologies, so you really just don't need to worry about it. Decor and clutter, they basically just spawn more nodes in a fancy way. It doesn't really matter. Monument topology, this is going to make like random barrels show up, and food boxes. If you're removing a monument, you want to get rid of the monument topology, otherwise you're going to have like random barrels showing up. Now, as you can see, I went through monument topology. There's no monument topology here. That's because we haven't applied it yet. So I'm going to select our power plant again. We're going to apply our topology mask. Boom. Looks like nothing happened, right? But we go back to our terrain painter. We've got monument topology. But what else? Not just monument topology. It's added a bunch of stuff. So it might have added some decor. That might have been there from the cliffs, actually. What about road? Did it add road? It did not. So even though there's roads here, I guess it didn't add road. It definitely did add building topology, though. Look at all that building topology. Now stuff can't spawn there. What else? What else does it add? Is that it? It's just building and and I just did that whole rigmarole for that. It's basic. What about roadside? Did it add any of that? No roadside. I guess road and roadside are only road stuff, right? So that kind of makes sense, I guess. Monument, road. There used to be a power line topology. That was years ago, though. They got rid of that. To add swamp. The swamp monuments add swamp. And summit. So, just so you're aware. Sometimes, so it added cliff topology here. Some monuments have cliffs, and they will add the cliff topology, so you gotta watch out about that. They might even add cliffside. No, it didn't add cliffside. No rail or rail side, no offshore. Different monuments will add different topologies. So power plant, I guess, is pretty basic. It just adds building topology and monument topology, and then it just relies on the other underlying topologies from the terrain. So it's a fairly basic one. But there you go. Now we've, for the most part, added this monument. We're still not done yet, though, because we skipped the first one of the most important ones, which is the alpha mask. What does the alpha mask do, you might ask? Well, alpha is transparency. You can think of it as the transparency layer specifically for the terrain. So what we're going to do is it's going to poke a visual hole in the terrain. Now, this is the important part, okay? It's visual only. So it will make the terrain invisible in that spot, but it does not make it so that you can go through the terrain. That's handled by a different part of the custom map API or the game code or whatever you want to think of it as. And that's a terrain trigger. So if you want players to be able to go through the terrain, you have to add a terrain trigger, which is going to look like terrain. I'm going to search it up real quick. Terrain trigger. So this is like it's an invisible volume. In the game, it's not going to look like this. If this map loads into the game, you're not going to see this like big box. But if a player is inside this box, they will fall through the terrain. So if I just had this box like over here, players will walk up here, and as soon as they go inside the box, they'll just drop through the terrain here without warning. And even though it doesn't look like there's a hole here, what this has done is it's effectively created a invisible hole in the terrain. Okay. Now I can pair that with, let's change the layer to alpha here. Now I can pair that by putting a hole, paintbrush mode, there we go. By putting a hole in the terrain. So now there's a hole in the ground. You can't really see it because the terrain trigger's like, Okay, now there's a hole in the ground. So hole in the ground plus terrain trigger. Now there's a hole in the ground that players can fall through, and they can also see the hole in the ground. So what's this useful for? Because, you know, if a player were to actually walk over this, they'd just die, and it probably wouldn't be a fun experience. I'm going to Control Z all this, delete that. What this is for is this. So if you're familiar with power plant, you know there's supposed to be a big concrete ditch here, or like retention pond or sewer thing. They call them like sewer drain walls, is what the prefab's called. But if I go under here, you can see, oh look, there's all this stuff here. So the way that these work is the player's going under the terrain here, and these monuments, they have terrain triggers built in. You don't have to worry about the terrain triggers. You only need to worry about terrain triggers for custom monuments and stuff like that. What you do need to worry about, though, is when you add a monument, you need to apply the alpha mask, which is going to make the terrain transparent in these spots so that players can actually see the holes in the ground, basically. And when I click that, I'm going to click it in 3, 2, 1. Boom. So you can see now we can see through the ground in this spot, and it works seamlessly because these sewer drain walls have a terrain trigger built into them that you can't see. It's invisible, even in the editor, that allows players to slip through the terrain here, but instead of just falling through the ground, there's this sewer prefab to catch them. And the end result is essentially this illusion that this is all one contiguous piece of the ground. And then it'll also do things like it'll poke holes here for the sewer ladders. Now, it doesn't do a perfect job all the time, okay? Even though it's like aligned with the grid and all that, there's no way for them to like actually like predict all this. So sometimes you have to go through and like help it, you know, maybe poke a hole in it, or expand the hole so that, you know, it's better or whatever, and it actually like works. Sometimes the hole is too big, and look, this is a thing that comes down to resolution. So actually, if I take the eraser tool and I erase this, and now it's broken. So yeah, some things there's just not a whole lot you can do about it. I guess what you could do is, now this is kind of like a ghetto option, I guess. Or you know what would be better? Here, you can take the terrain tool, set it to a really low value, okay? Because this thing's really intense. It moves very quickly. So set it to like my favorite value is 0.2. That's like the lowest value you can set it to without it getting weird. And then you just drop the terrain a little bit. I'm just clicking once. That's how fast this tool moves. So, you know, I'm hovering over, and by the way, if you just click, it goes up. If you want it to go down, you hold Alt, ALT. You hold the Alt key. By holding Alt and then I click, it goes down instead of up. And then what I'm doing basically is I'm just pushing the terrain down so that this little part of the prefab, so see like below here, there's this little curtain on the edge of the drain wall prefabs down here. And when I push the terrain down, it lines up better with that. Now I just ruined the one for the train track, so I'm just going to Control Z that and revert it. But if you see parts where the terrain is coming up above that curtain and it looks bad, like in this area, then you can go around and you can make minor height adjustments, because you're just going to have a lot more precision in adjusting the height of the map versus adjusting like how wide the hole is, because there's only a certain resolution that you get with the alpha tool. You can see like I've got size 1, so I think this is 1 meter. Yeah, 1 meter, and that's honestly, I think that's the best resolution you can get. A lot of maps will have the resolution set to 2 meters. Actually, wait a minute, I think this map is set to 2 meters. Terrain trigger. This is a 1 meter block, okay? So how big is it? How big is the alpha layer? Okay, so Our resolution is 2 meters. Great. We've just added our monument. Now, I'll make a different video for connecting the train station here. For now, here's how you fix this, okay? You type in the word pile in the search of the prefab list here, and you find a nice big coal pile? No, hold on. Coal pile, gravel. Yeah, gravel pile. And, you know, you just do this. Boom! Problem solved. Easy peasy. So, there you go. Now we have power plant. It has been successfully added to the map. You can actually load this map into the game, and power plant will be here, and it'll work exactly the way that it should. Now that I've explained topology and alpha and all that fun stuff, you should have a pretty good understanding of what it's going to look like to remove this monument. And that's what we're going to do now, I guess. So, we've just added this monument. It looks great. This will work in-game. I'm going to remove it now. So what does removing it look like? Well, we just click on it, delete. We press the delete key on the keyboard, and boom, it's gone. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. This doesn't look good. There's holes in the floor. And players will see this, by the way. They won't be able to fall through it now because there's no more terrain trigger there. But there is a hole there, and you can see it. So we gotta get rid of the holes first off, I guess. And that can be done by going to your terrain painter and opening up the alpha layer. It's this drop down here. You find the alpha layer. Remember, this is our transparency layer. It's how we poke holes in the map. And we set this to, ironically, eraser. So painting erases the terrain, and erasing paints the terrain. So that's a fun way to name that. But you can just think of it as like painting the alpha layer. If the alpha layer is painted, then there's a hole there. So what we're going to do is we're going to erase the holes. See, now it makes more sense. So we just go here and we erase all the holes. What you could do is, because the alpha layer usually isn't impacted anywhere except for like monuments and caves, you can just set your brush to be like really big and just, you know, erase all of this area here, because, you know, it's not going to like change anything else about the map or anything like that, and you can just make absolutely sure there are no more holes here. So that. Now next, can you tell that there was a power plant here? There's all this splat. So we gotta get rid of the splat now, because we got rid of the monument and we don't want it to look like there was a monument there. So we're going to repaint everything. There's a couple different ways, you know, schools of thought for this. You could try to recreate the original terrain if you want, and, you know, you could go full Michelangelo on it. But honestly, the super easy way to do it is to just make it all grass. And that's what we're going to do, because it's easier. So I'm going to set the opacity. I like 15. Like 15-ish is good. You can set it lower or higher or whatever. This just makes it so that the blending works a lot better, because if you set it to 100 and you know, you use a tool with a harsh edge, then you've got this like harsh edge now, and it looks really awkward. So instead, I like to use this feathered edge. But even the feathered edge, if it's set to 100, it still makes a harsh edge. So I like to drop that down to like 15-ish and just make the brush really big, so it's a nice big feathered edge. And then we can go around and I'm just click and hold, and we can just paint all this grass. And you can see snow gets affected from far away, okay? Like my brush is all the way over here, and the snow is getting messed up from far away. So just, I don't know, be aware of that, I guess. But it's not going to make too much of a difference, honestly. Like, nobody really is going to see it. Now it's all grass now. Now, sometimes because of the feathered edge and because you're using kind of a weak value, like 13 or whatever, it's a good idea to go over it a couple times and just make absolutely sure that like it's all grass now. You know, we don't have some lingering, like a little bit of gravel or something there. You know, because sometimes you can miss some of it, and then when you go to like look at the G map and you look at the location you're in, where am I? Here? Yeah. And you can look at it and you can be like, oh, wait a minute, there's still stuff here. But this, by the way, these splotches, that's biome, that's not splat. So this is coming from, like, there's some Arctic biome here, I guess. Like if I go look at the biome, yeah, the blue is Arctic, the orange is tundra, and the green is temperate. So that's what's happening there on the map, just so you know. Okay, so we fixed our splat. There is still kind of an issue, though. You can still see that there was a power plant here. It's pretty obvious because of the terrain texture. And when you look at the ground up close, I mean, it's like you're really not going to be able to tell, honestly. But it is really flat, like really flat terrain. And so, like, it just comes off as like sloppy and kind of obvious that you got rid of something here, and some dude's gonna build like a super ultra mega clan base, and so maybe we don't want things to be that OP, but also we don't want to like do a ton of work to put back all of the cliffs. Now you might be wondering like, oh well, isn't there like a procedural way to put the cliffs back? There isn't. There's no way to do that. You can only spawn cliffs for the whole map or nothing. It's the whole map or bust. So we're not going to bother with that because that's a lot of work. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to come in here and I'm just going to like mix things up. We're going to do like the 52 card shuffle version of the terrain recreation. So instead of having a bunch of like cliffs and stuff, we're just going to have a bunch of hills. And I'm going to do that by just randomly like going around with this brush size. I'm going to set it to like 100. And I want to go a little bit faster than I normally go. So I'm going to set it to 0.4 instead of 0.2. And we're just going to go around. You can see it's lifting it up ever so slightly. And I'm just making random little loopy motions. And, you know, if you want it to actually turn out good, you don't want to just go like randomly everywhere because that's not going to do anything. You want to kind of go like nice and slow and like, you know, linger on areas for a bit. Like really make sure you're raising up the terrain in certain areas more than others because that's the important part. You don't want to just make the flat area higher. You actually want to like add new patterns here that didn't exist before. And so what we're essentially doing is we're kind of like just creating like human noise. Like we're just creating random noise in the terrain where we're like lifting up the terrain in certain areas and letting it stay low in others so that it just kind of looks like random hilly terrain. And as you can see, this hasn't really done a whole lot. If you wanted to do more, I guess you could like set this to a higher value. Like I set this to 1. And then we could like really go super fast and go around. But actually, the reason it still looks flat is more so because of my brush size. I chose a really big brush size. And that's because I just want to add like really wide noise for now. And so what I'm going to do is, you know, we're just going to raise it up a little bit in these areas. And then that looks goodish, okay? But we want to add a little bit more detail. So we're actually going to take this. We're going to drop this down to like 30, 32, I guess. And now you see the brush is much smaller, and so it looks like we got a lot more work ahead of us, but don't worry. We're just going to add some finer details to very specific smaller areas. And because our brush is smaller and our opacity is still the same, it's actually going to work really, really fast. So we're just going to go around to different areas and we're just going to add more randomness, more noise. We're just raising the terrain up in random little spots here. I think the terrain tool works faster for terrain that's closer to the camera. Like for some reason when I go like way far away and I try to raise up the terrain, it seems like nothing's happening. And I don't think that's just an artifact of of the fact that the terrain's far away. I think something is happening with like the processing, where like if your game, or not your game, if the editor is running at like a higher FPS, it will move the terrain faster actually. So if you increase the performance of your graphics card, it will change like the way that the terrain responds to the terrain tool, which is fun and weird. So yeah. But alright, cool. We've added a bunch of randomness. This looks good. It's probably fine, right? But we're missing a couple things. First off, do you remember? Who remembers? Topology. So not only did now our cliffside is gone here, and so is our cliff topology because we erased it earlier, but guess what? Our building topology is still there. It's still there. Now you might be like, okay, well, whatever. It's just red building topology. Like, what difference is that gonna make? Well, let's actually, you know what? We're gonna do a little experiment. We'll load this up. Okay, so I spun up a server, and the area we were working on. Hello. Jesus. It's right over here. So a couple things that we probably notice here. First is no grass. There's no grass here. And that's because of our building topology. The building topology is preventing the grass from showing up because it's telling the game that there should be buildings here. And we don't want grass to be in the buildings. The other thing you probably noticed is that the terrain is very spiky. It's pretty rough. And so this is an unintended consequence of using the terrain raise lower tool. I don't know why. It's because of RustEdit. It's because of the way that it's programmed. But for some reason, like a small bit of noise is introduced whenever the raise lower tool is used, and it makes the terrain all bumpy. And so whenever you use the raise lower tool, you always are going to have to go over the terrain again with the smooth tool to smooth out all the little minor bumps. And, it's pretty easy and simple to get around, but it is something that you have to remember to do, which is that whenever you're using the raise lower tool and you're trying to introduce a bunch of noise, it's going to introduce a bunch of like little micro noise, and that's just going to make the terrain like really rough. And so we want to go over with the smooth tool. But more importantly, because people will deal with rough terrain, is the building topology. The building topology is the reason nothing's like spawning over here. So we want to fix that. So we will. So we're going to go over here to our terrain tool. We're going to modification type. We're going to go to the smooth tool. Anytime you use the raise lower tool, use it with the smooth tool to smooth it all out. Come on. Okay. This software. Alright, I found if you just want to remove like the super granular like sharp bumps and just make the terrain look like smoothish, but you want to keep all that detail, just set the opacity to like 10. And it'll basically like max out the amount of smoothness that can be applied so that you still keep all those details that you just put in, but you get rid of that like unnatural like bumpiness that makes it look super bad. And part of the key to this is to do it all in like one pass. If you try to smooth it out and then come back and smooth it out again, the 10 will be reapplied again and it'll make it more smooth. And that's not necessarily what you want. So you want it all to go in one go. So right now I'm holding down left click to start smoothing, and we're just going to smooth this all in one go. And we're going back and forth, so we're all in one go. And you can see when I pass over these details that they change slightly. But I'm holding it now, and now we're kind of at a point where it's stopped. And that's because that 10 is limiting it. It's stopping it from going any further than this level of detail. I'm still holding left click this whole time. I'm still holding left click so that it's all one singular edit. So it remembers that, okay, this is where it's been applied, this is where it hasn't been applied, and we're just going to use it over and over and over again in one go. We're still holding left click, so this is still one big giant smooth edit, and we're just going to keep going, keep going, keep going, and still holding left click. Even when I'm hitting right click to turn the camera and stuff, I'm still holding left click. It keeps it as one edit. Alright, now I'm done. I'm going to release left click, and it'll take a second, and now it's applied all the changes. And we can see now that our terrain is smoothish. I mean, it's still got, you know, it's still a little bit rough around the edges. What we could do is we could go back and we could apply it one more time. So, you know, it's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be perfect. So there we go. We applied it again. And now it's like more smooth. It's more smooth. This could be more smooth. So, alright. So that did it. That's smooth enough for me. And last but not least, we're going to go back to our terrain painter, and we're going to fix the building topology. So we're going to erase that building topology so that stuff will actually spawn here again, so that we remove the monument now. And it's not just the building topology. Remember, when you remove a monument, there's different monuments that apply different things, and you don't necessarily want those things in those spots. Like, remember, we applied this cliff topology. We don't necessarily want it there. Some monuments will have ocean topology or beach topology or whatever. Power plant doesn't have that, so we don't need to worry about it. Also, remember, we checked, and it did not apply rail topology. It also did not apply road topology. Some monuments will apply road topology, so you got to be careful about that. If you remove a road, it'll leave a big barren strip of no grass and prevent people from being able to build bases and stuff in that area. So, you know, make sure you go through all of your topologies, and remember, monument topology is a big one too. So it added a bunch of this monument topology. We want to get rid of that also. What else? Mainland, if this is supposed to be mainland. Mainland basically just tells the game where animals can walk. Hilltop, it did not change. Decor maybe? No, that's from the cliffs. Okay, so for power plant, we just needed to worry about the cliff topology, the building topology, and the monument topology. Like I said, some monuments add summit, like the swamps. Some add swamp topology. Some will add river. Some will add lake. So it really depends on what you're removing. But you want to make sure that you get rid of all the topology that isn't necessarily supposed to be there once you're done with it. So that's good. We've got it successfully removed now. Power plant is now gone, and in its place we've got some fairly randomish looking terrain. If we open our map here, hopefully our efforts, yep, were not in vain. So this looks kind of like randomish terrain. This map viewer is different than the in-game map viewer. Like, if I go back to the game, we can see that you can't really tell as much the actual shape of the terrain as you can in the RustEdit map viewer. You can kind of tell, but it's mostly just projecting the splat onto here. So you really don't need to worry too much about the shapes. Another quirk of RustEdit when it comes to working with procedural maps, this is a RustEdit problem, okay? This is not like a game code problem or anything like that. The clutter layer is not applied the same way as a procedural map when you save a map in RustEdit. The clutter layer and the height map layer are actually two separate layers. So like, what am I talking about when I mean the clutter layer? Clutter is like these like little rocks and stuff here. Like, see this little like pebble and stuff, and like these little like shrubs and grass and like flowers and stuff. So this is called terrain clutter, or that's what Facepunch calls it. So this stuff actually doesn't exist in the map file. What happens is there is a clutter layer that's essentially kind of like a height map, and that gets loaded into the game client, and the game client then on your end renders all these little details wherever the clutter layer is. This procedural map, if you were to load it in with the seed and the size or whatever, these cliffs would not be bald. The process of loading them into RustEdit and then saving it as a different custom map is what turned them bald. RustEdit made them bald. As you can see, the clutter is under the cliff. It matches the height map. And it's not supposed to do that. It's actually supposed to snap to the top of these cliffs. So if I were to load like a procedural map, which takes time, so I'm not going to do it, sorry. But actually, you can see the clutter is actually following the cliffs here. So see where the cliff meets the terrain? It actually goes over on top of the cliff. And I mean, some of them kind of like, well, actually that looks pretty good. That's really not bad, actually. Some of the tufts of grass used to like float and stuff. I mean, this isn't even that bad. It actually just looks cool. But this is, maybe they fixed it. Well, here's a floating rock, I guess. But yeah. So see how it looks good. Notice how it looks good. Whereas the non-procedural one doesn't look good. It's bald. That's because the clutter layer is being remapped when the map is saved in RustEdit. The clutter layer is being remapped to just be the exact same shape as the height map. Whereas on a base procedural map, like when you load a procedural map, the clutter will actually stick to the cliffs like it's supposed to. And then we can actually see below where the terrain is below. Okay. The terrain is now bald. So this is the preferable option. So here's how you fix that. What we want to do is we want to take all of our cliff prefabs, and what we're going to do is we're just going to snap the height map to the top of the cliff prefab. So that way the terrain just matches the cliff. That means we're going to have to apply this to every single cliff on the map, which seems like it's going to be super tedious, but there is a cheat code. It's very simple. So I'm going to deselect this, and what we want to do is we want to select every single cliff prefab on the map at one time and apply their height modifiers. So to do that, we're going to bring up the scene hierarchy, is what it's called in RustEdit. It's basically like the prefabs that are on the map, that are in the scene, essentially. And you do that with the, well, you could do it over here. You could go to View, and you could open the scene hierarchy with this drop-down from View. Or you can press the hotkey H, and H will open the scene hierarchy. So here's our scene hierarchy window. You can see we've got all these prefabs in the scene, and we're just going to type in the word cliff. And what this is going to do is it's going to bring up a list of all the cliffs on the whole map. And there's a lot of them because it's a big map. And there's this great button down here that says select all. You can select all the cliffs, every single one of them. Now you can see my game's lagging pretty hard. We're going to hit the apply height mask, and it's going to like freeze the game for a second. It's going to apply the heights to every single cliff all at once. So you might get a pretty bad lag spike when you press this. But here we go. Yeah, it's still going. It's like frozen now. Alright, there it is. That was pretty quick. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect, and we're going to close the scene hierarchy. And as you can see now, the terrain is basically the same shape as the cliff. The terrain has been brought up to the cliff's level. So if I move the cliff, you can see the terrain's like basically right there. This is going to fix your bald cliffs. It has a cost though, which is that the terrain can't perfectly fit the cliff. So you're going to get these weird like jaggedy edges where the terrain's trying its best to match up with the cliff, but it just can't handle it. Like, it's just not going to be able to do it. If you're picky about this and it needs to be good, then what you can actually do is you can take this and you can go to the alpha layer, make this brush a lot smaller, and paintbrush, and anywhere you see jaggedy edges, you can just make the terrain invisible. Now you're gonna have to play with it a bit and adjust it because, you know, it's not gonna be perfect. So, you know, you're gonna have some holes, but if you get it right, then you can just basically make the terrain invisible. Now, like I said earlier, players aren't necessarily going to fall through the terrain because it's invisible. The terrain still has like the collision box or whatever. And then like anytime you have issues like this, by the way. So here, I'm going to drop this down a little. There we go, it's hidden. So now the jaggedy edges are hidden, but the terrain layer is actually going to load correctly, or the clutter layer is actually going to still appear on top of the cliff, and so our cliffs are not bald anymore. So that's how you fix that. And it should be applied for all the cliffs, all over, all of the terrain, everywhere. Including these guys, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Although it doesn't do a good job with these, I'm going to be honest. That is how you add a monument or remove a monument from your procedural map. So if you're running a server and you want your procedural map to have a monument, that's how you do it.